Well, at the root of what we're going to be talking about today is a detriment to metabolic health, which at the root of that is insulin and insulin resistance. So I think it'd be helpful here up front in our conversation to talk about as somebody is gaining weight, and I'll caveat, somebody doesn't necessarily have to be gaining weight for this to happen, and we'll talk about that after. But as somebody starts gaining weight, we'll use that as our example, and their body starts revving up the amount of insulin it's making to control the blood glucose. So basically, early stages when metabolic health starts to decline into more advanced stages. Let's talk about the insulin piece.
Yeah. So the better test to find out what's going on early in this process is the insulin, not the glucose. So you might have a normal glucose level at the expense of a very high insulin level. So the way I kind of put it together, the body doesn't like the glucose to be elevated. I mean, it's not a healthy thing. Over a period of years, if the blood glucose is elevated, you get blindness, kidney failure, amputations. I mean, this is what diabetes is and what diabetes does. So the body sends out, it wants blood glucose to be really well regulated, sends out insulin to keep it regulated, and that can go on for years. And even before you're told you have pre-diabetes, you may have this elevated insulin level. And if you didn't have a formal test where you consumed some carbs and then watch what the insulin did over time, you would never know. But gaining weight is one marker of that. Having a high triglyceride to HDL ratio in the blood is another marker of that. Those are things that are typically measured today. Insulin is not easy to measure, and most doctors don't do it unless you ask them. Now you can get labs done and without doctor's orders, and you can just go to a lab or have them ordered, and you have to pay out of pocket, of course. So insurance won't cover it. But the harsh reality is that pre-diabetes, there's like pre-diabetes where you're maybe 10 to 20 years before full-blown diabetes happens. And that's kind of a theme in metabolic illness, that even things like Alzheimer's, once you have a symptom, it's been about a 20-year process that's been going on. And so what we can do to stop that from happening is when you see your body going down that path, whether it be an elevated blood glucose or insulin or extra fat weight on your body, higher triglyceride, HDL ratio, you want to start making changes. You might, don't get me wrong, not everyone needs a keto level carb restriction, but sugar is the thing to be careful about, not fat in the food. And it's a tough consensus to bring about to change, but the scientists have all made that flip. In consensus papers of scientists, they basically say it's not fat. It's not saturated fat. That's the problem. That research, though, is a tough time getting through, penetrating other organizations that have vested interests in that message or other elements of that. So, yeah, I mean, you can just assume that diet will be controversial forever. You find something that works for you and get things that are measurable in terms of health and stick with it. And follow, now with YouTube, it's fantastic. You can follow influencers, wake up every day. How are you doing? They're still here. The internet has allowed people to band together in groups that has actually now changed medical science. And that's a phenomenon. Again, it's kind of sad, but what people are doing in their own lives is way ahead of the medical mainstream. I mean, it's like they're still using phones with cords, and we're using flip phones. No, I mean, smartphones. It's funny how new technology, when it comes to nutrition and medical, is not adopted by the mainstream. Well, okay. Maybe because they're not making money from it. That's the obvious. The pharma influence in the medical training and teaching is really strong. And we don't get much training about nutrition as doctors, sadly.
You mentioned the fact that insulin resistance can build up over 10 or 20 years, which I think is why this insulin resistance is such a scary thing. And destroying so many people's health because, again, it takes so long for symptoms to start appearing sometimes. So the way I understand it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, what's happening is people are having too much sugar, too much carbohydrates in the diet. Sugar builds up in the body, and then what the body tries to do is to shovel that into cells in the body using insulin. And over time, it needs more and more insulin. So it starts making more insulin, leading to insulin resistance. The body is resisting allowing that insulin to move glucose into the cells. So it keeps making more, just trying to ram through. And in the background, you're building up your insulin over this 10 or 20 year period of time. And you mentioned the blood glucose causing certain health issues. The insulin being high and people not knowing it is causing different issues at the same time.
Yeah. So the best marker of the health consequences is the multiplication of the glucose times the insulin itself. So that if your insulin's high but your glucose is normal, there's a problem. There's a health-related issue. And it's interesting because the more this is understood, the more complicated it gets. Of course, not all tissues get insulin resistant. And then over time, while it seems irreversible, I've seen things reverse that where other people said it couldn't reverse. So there's always hope with this, and then of course the nuance is some people can tolerate more carbs than others, and that's it's not fair. Even within the same family, one of my brothers, he was the natural athlete, played college basketball and semi-pro, and I was studying for the medical MCATs, so we kind of selected out, and that's kind of generally true. If you were athletic naturally and you had athletics and sports keep you healthy for the first half of your life, then age may catch up with you. And of course, most people can't keep up that level of athleticism. And so you're having to ask the diet to do a little more than the exercise component of your health equation. But I'm optimistic and hopeful that to at least give it a try. I mean, worst case is we improve someone's diet, they get to eat great healthy foods, and worst case is that things just get better, they don't get entirely reversed. But it's an exciting time, and I'm such a believer in nutrition as the key. My field has just kind of gone off internal medicine into medication care. It's really pretty depressing.
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
I've had people, even if they've been on insulin for 20 years, get off the insulin in as little as 8 weeks. The weight loss happens about 1 to 2 pounds per week. My philosophy is to get it to work the first time.